January 11th, 1944. 20,000 feet above northern Germany, the sky is a chaos of vapor trails, smoke, and sunlight flashing off spinning aluminum. A formation of B-17 flying fortresses grinds forward through the frozen air, their engines thundering, wings trembling under the recoil of their own guns. Inside one of them, Miss Liberty II of the 381st Bomb Group, a waist gunner fights the impossible. His 50 caliber Browning has jammed at the worst moment. A squadron of Messerschmitt Bf-109s is diving straight through the formation. He yanks the charging handle once, twice. Nothing. Shell casings roll at his feet as tracer fire streaks past the open window. The intercom crackles with a pilot ES voice. "We've lost gun coverage right side. Engineers said it might happen again." Down on the tarmac in East Anglia, those same engineers listen to radio chatter through static. They know the pattern, the failure, the fix. But this time, the solution must come mid-flight, or 10 crews won't make it home. By the beginning of 1944, the air war over Europe had reached its breaking point. The United States 8th Air Force, operating from dozens of airfields scattered across eastern England, was flying deep into the heart of Nazi-controlled territory almost every day. Their weapon of choice, the B-17 Flying Fortress, a machine that became both a symbol of American power and a test of its limits. The strategy was simple in theory, but brutal in execution. Daylight precision bombing. American commanders believed that with tight formations and accurate Norden bomb sights, their crews could destroy Germany's industrial heart. But in daylight came visibility, death. Every mission meant crossing hundreds of miles of flak-filled sky, and waves of fighters waiting near Bremen, Schweinfurt, or Regensburg. The Flying Fortress was famous for taking punishment. Photographs from returning missions showed aircraft with entire control surfaces shredded, engines shot out, and holes big enough to crawl through, yet somehow still landing on English soil. But inside that armor and mythology were countless moving parts: fuel lines, oxygen systems, hydraulic turrets, and the heart of the bomber's defense, the Browning M2, 50 caliber machine guns. Each B-17 carried up to 13 of them. When they all worked, a fortress was nearly untouchable. When one jammed, an entire sector of the sky became a fatal blind spot. The Browning had earned its reputation in every theater of war, but in the frozen stratosphere over Europe, it was a different beast. Metal contracted, lubricants stiffened, and ammunition belts twisted in the constant vibration. Engineers could predict these failures. They could not prevent them all. In East Anglia, the life of an American airfield revolved around that constant cycle of flight and repair. Before dawn, crews staggered to their aircraft under dim blue lamps. After sunset, ground engineers crawled into fuselages lit only by flashlights, inspecting every weapon, every cable. They weren't celebrated like pilots. Their names rarely appeared in after-action reports. Yet every successful sortie was built on their hands. The welders, armorers, and mechanical sergeants who refused to let a single fault go unaddressed. By late 1943, reports of jammed side guns had become a serious concern. Waist positions, especially on the right side of B-17s, were prone to misfeeds caused by ammunition belts striking the fuselage frame during violent evasive maneuvers. Test crews at Ridgewell and Bassingbourn tried minor modifications, adjusting feed chutes, adding rollers, changing belt angles, but nothing seemed to hold once the aircraft climbed above 20,000 feet, and temperatures plunged to -40 degrees. The issue came to a head during the January raids against aircraft factories around Brunswick. Several gunners recorded identical malfunctions within minutes of engagement. For the engineers, it was proof that something fundamental had to change. They began experimenting with field-made braces and new belt guides fabricated from scrap aluminum. Some were crude, hand-riveted pieces with pencil marks still visible, but each carried the same philosophy. If it keeps the guns firing, it stays. That mindset, adaptation over perfection, became the hallmark of American engineering during the Air War. While the Germans often pursued precision craftsmanship, the Americans prized speed and flexibility. Every improvement was tested in combat within days. Every failure became data for the next night's work. This culture of innovation under fire would, in time, overwhelm the Luftwaffe's technical advantage through pure, relentless persistence. Back on Miss Liberty the Tudu, the crew still fought to clear the jammed weapon. And on the ground, a group of young mechanics at Ridgewell were reviewing the latest malfunction reports. Somewhere in those pages lay the pattern that would decide whether that plane, and many others, lived to see another dawn. The airfields of wartime East Anglia were like miniature cities carved into farmland. From the air they looked identical. 3 intersecting runways, blister hangars, and endless rows of Nissen huts glistening under frost. On the ground, they pulsed with constant activity. Jeep engines backfired in the dark. Mechanics smoked in silence beside glowing heaters. Trucks rumbled past, hauling ammunition boxes or new gun barrels packed in grease and wax paper. The 381st Bomb Group's base at Ridgewell was one of dozens. Each morning began before sunrise, with crews dressing in electrically heated suits and gathering for mission briefings. Red lines on wall maps stretched deep into Germany: Hanover, Brunswick, Leipzig. When the bombers thundered down the runway, their ground crews would wait by the control tower, eyes fixed on the horizon, counting the aircraft as they returned. Every missing plane left an unspoken hollow that no one dared voice aloud. Among these ground personnel were the ordnance and armament sections. They were the unsung half of the air war. Their job was to make sure every gun in every position fired as it should, not on paper, but in the frozen chaos of combat. The men who did this work were often teenagers from small American towns, machinists from Ohio, farm mechanics from Kansas, auto repairmen from California. They understood tools instinctively. They improvised constantly. Inside their workshops, the smell of gun oil mingled with the clang of steel. Engineers tore apart Brownings, cleaned them with diesel-soaked rags, replaced worn springs, and reassembled them in silence. A single misaligned feed, Paul, could mean a dead gunner at 20,000 feet. For every successful sortie, there was a night like this, a handful of mechanics bent over a bench, finding the flaw before the dawn call. Their most common enemy wasn't the Luftwaffe, it was the cold. Oil thickened, metal shrank, and ammo belts stiffened into rigid snakes that refused to feed properly. In response, engineers experimented with every combination of preheating and lubrication they could imagine. Some warmed belts in makeshift ovens. Others wrapped gun housings in cloth soaked with antifreeze. There was no manual for this. The learning was earned by loss. By late January 1944, an idea began circulating between groups at Ridgewell, Kimballton, and Bassingbourn. Several mechanics noticed that the right-side waist guns consistently jammed during the first burst of firing, when the belt was cold and stiff. One sergeant, a former auto mechanic from Detroit, proposed bending a short length of radio wire into a guide spring, forcing the belt to feed upward at a gentler angle. The solution looked ridiculous, improvised, and unapproved. Yet when tested on the ground, it worked flawlessly. The wire trick, as crews called it, began appearing quietly across hangars, passed hand to hand, plane to plane. In that atmosphere, the boundary between engineering and invention blurred. There were no laboratories, no patents, only experience, observation, and instinct. When a crew returned with a frozen or ruptured gun, it was disassembled before the engines cooled. Every bullet path, every jammed link became evidence in a mechanical investigation that never stopped. On the other side of the channel, Luftwaffe pilots noticed something unnerving: the resilience of American bombers. Even when entire sections of an aircraft seemed dead, its remaining guns kept firing with deadly accuracy. German intelligence analysts studying wrecked B-17s found variations, homemade modifications, and field adjustments unlike anything from factory manuals. Proof that the Americans were changing their machines faster than the Germans could analyze them. That relentless adaptation defined the U.S. approach to industrial warfare. Engineers didn't wait for permission. They fixed what failed, then taught others to copy the solution. By the time Miss Liberty the SAC-2 lifted off for its January mission over Brunswick, that wire trick had already saved several aircraft. But no one yet knew that, within hours, it would be tested in the most unforgiving laboratory possible. The B-17 was a machine built from rivets, glass, and courage. Inside, the noise was overwhelming. The drone of 4 engines, the hammering of guns, the vibration of airframe, and fear. For the crew of Miss Liberty II, the right waist gunner, Corporal John Evans, was 21 years old. He'd learned to handle a Browning only a year earlier. By January 1944, he'd logged 11 missions and had already seen what happened when a gun jammed. He'd watched enemy fighters slice through a formation's blind side like wolves. That morning, with the temperature near -40, frost crystals drifted inside the fuselage like powdered glass. Evans's hands were numb inside his gloves. When his gun seized halfway through a burst, he moved by reflex. Pull the charging handle. Clear the link. Check the belt. Nothing. In those seconds, he felt the isolation that every gunner feared. Surrounded by firepower, yet defenseless. A silent corner in a fortress of sound. The Browning M2 50-caliber machine gun was the backbone of the American air war. But at 25,000 feet, the thin metal links of the ammo belt stiffened, lubricant froze, and recoil mechanisms struggled. The ground engineers who installed that wire trick believed it would reduce tension and allow the belt to flex naturally. It was one of those tiny, unseen details that separated life from death. In combat, a single B-17 was never alone. Dozens flew in staggered boxes to maximize defensive coverage. Lose one gun, and a gap opened. Lose two, and the pattern collapsed. German pilots studied these weaknesses, probing for the least defended angle. When Evans's gun went silent, a Bf-109 pilot on the attack run would notice immediately. The incoming enemy fire that raked the fuselage wasn't random. It was precision exploitation. The Americans countered with what they did best: adaptation under fire. Over the radio, Evans's crewmates called out, "Right side blind!" The top turret swiveled down to assist. That coordination was the invisible armor that kept fortresses alive. What separated the U.S. Army Air Forces from its opponents wasn't just industrial scale. It was the relationship between air crews and their engineers. German pilots often met their mechanics briefly. American crews lived beside theirs. They drank together, joked, and shared losses. Every fix mattered because someone's life depended on it. The wire trick was more than a mechanical adjustment. It was a bond of trust, a physical manifestation of an engineer's care reaching 30,000 feet into the sky. When Evans fought with his jammed gun that morning, he was unknowingly testing the collective work of dozens of minds and hands that had labored through countless nights to keep him alive. By noon, as the bombers turned toward home, that trust would be tested to its breaking point, not just for one plane, but for an entire formation. Thank you for watching. If you found this story of ingenuity and courage as fascinating as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more hidden histories from the front lines. We'll see you next time.